Hello and welcome to the Building Boom podcast. My name's Steve Fitz. I'm the owner and managing director of Building Boom. We're a marketing agency for new home builders. My background has been in residential construction since 1991. I started on the tools and then moved into the office pretty quickly and worked my way through all of the major roles within a new home building company to ultimately running a new home building company and then going out on my own, selling new homes, as well as doing all the marketing, and then ultimately, after being asked by multiple building companies to start a marketing agency and do their work, I moved into that. But in the Building Boom podcast, I really want to talk about the fundamentals of growing a building company, not just from the marketing perspective, but also from the construction side, because it's essential in the climate that we're in, the state of building and construction in Australia. But this is universal. Globally, new home building in particular is one of the most, if not the most difficult businesses and companies to run and grow and manage. And that's the reason why I wanted to start this podcast, because I wanted to share some of the lessons that I've learned along the way. And a lot of those are very difficult and expensive lessons in all the roles that I've done in order to help builders be more resolute in their vision, be more thorough in the way that they conduct their business, and also to give them a bit of an advantage when they are operating their building company so that they don't make the mistakes that are common, but they can also have insights as to what's coming and how to prepare for that in the future. So for the most part, I'm not going to share things from the really big project home volume builders. Those companies are good enough to sort of manage on their own. I've worked in those companies. I understand the systems, the procedures, the inner workings of how they operate. But I'm going to use that information as well as the information I gained from working with smaller bespoke building companies, from startups all the way through to sort of that 40 million turnover. Those areas that are most challenging as you grow a company, those are the things that I want to share. And where we can, I'll share what the big boys are doing so that we can see where the future lies for you as you're growing your building company. But for the most part, we don't have the luxuries that they have. And so I'm going to start from very early stages of growth, where most builders that I know, they start on the tools, they might be a trade, they get their building diploma and they get their builder's registration, and then they want to start going out on their own. And for the most part, the builders that I've seen and worked with over the years have done it because they have done their own projects. They've either built their own homes or built some spec homes. And through that, and through word of mouth with friends, or perhaps through the builders that they've worked with, they've met people who've then asked them and approached them to do their work. So most builders that I know who start up and actually create a successful foundation all began by generating referrals. And those referrals came to them. They were already pre-sold or had a predisposition to build with that person. They already had some kind of element of trust as to why they might choose this particular person to build their home. And if that's you, you probably know that that story is true for yourself. But as you move forward and as you start to get those repeated processes going and repeated jobs coming in, then you decide, you know what, it's time to do this on my own. I now no longer want to work for another builder. I'm going to bite the bullet. I've got some projects under my belt. I've got some projects in the pipeline. That's going to give me enough cash flow to go out on my own. This is where I'm going to start, and then talk about the growth going forward. So if that's you and you're in those early days of forging ahead on your own and you're starting to build your staff list in the office to help you manage the projects, and you've got some contractors on the side who are helping you do some pricing or some drafting or some design work, then congratulations and well done. You are past the first speed hump of running a building company. The position that I want to speak to you about most, that is most important and I think kind of overlooked as to how important it is, especially by the bigger project builders, they often dismiss this, but it's where I actually started my career. And that is in a position of what's called, it's probably better known in the commercial world as Quantity Surveyor. In residential construction where I live, it's known as a scheduler or a scheduler. It's someone who takes off all the quantities required to build the house and then raises all the purchase orders once they get quotes in for certain trades, certain suppliers, and they raise all the purchase orders and then they send them out. And then through the life of the job, they will deal with the site supervisor if there's shortages or anything like that, or some materials go missing, or their quantities were out and then they have to order extra materials or get things picked up from one site, moved to another. That particular role is essential to maintaining profitability. So I want to discuss that role a bit further today in episode 1 as to why it's so important, but also what you need to know if you've never done that role as a builder, what you should know when you're managing someone in that role, and what is their key critical performance indicator for you as a builder, the responsibility you want to bestow on them so that they wear that responsibility within the office and they understand the importance and the significance of that role. So I've often said that estimators, for one, they're going to be the ones who make you money because they work out the quantities, they work out the pricing, and they set the markup or the margin that you're working with to give you your ultimate cash flow, but then your profitability. But a scheduler or a quantity surveyor, they're the ones responsible for protecting the profit. If they don't do a good job and you don't have the right person in that role who understands that, then your profits can get eroded. And in 1 or 2 jobs, not that big a deal. Sometimes you can manage that. But once you start moving to scale and you have 10 jobs and that profit is eroded on all 10 jobs, then you're in real trouble. And that's why I say that this particular role is of vital importance. So first and foremost, the number one attribute of anyone that you hire in this particular role needs to be attention to detail. They must have a decent level of construction knowledge, but they absolutely need to have a good level of attention to detail so they can understand the plans, understand your addenda and all the inclusions in the house. And then as they work out the quantities, they need to be skilled with maths and being able to work out measurements and quantities and materials to do the purchase orders. But if they don't have attention to detail, what happens is when they do those calculations in a role that is often disrupted right at critical moments, they will make mistakes, and not picking up those mistakes will ultimately cost you in what we call erosion, where they make a mistake, make an ordering error, and then let's say they should have ordered 8,000 bricks and instead they pressed the wrong button and they ordered 7,000. Those extra 1,000 bricks are already costed for in your estimate, but the courier costs or the extra delivery cost needed to deliver those extra 1,000 bricks when the mistake was found isn't covered. And so that immediately comes off your what we call erosion, or eats into your profitability for the job. That same level of attention for detail, for example, if they typed in 8,000 bricks and ordered them from the brick supplier, but then they typed in 9,000 bricks when they created the subcontractor's purchase order, being the bricklayer, and they put a 9 instead of an 8, then that bricklayer is going to get paid an extra 1,000 to lay an extra 1,000 bricks that were never on site. And this is why when you're doing this particular role, these little mistakes all add up, and within no amount of time you can find that you've blown your budgets in multiple areas throughout an entire job if you don't have someone in that position who is good at what they do, good understanding of construction, but also has a high level of attention to detail so that they can pick up these mistakes before they really become major problems. The next thing you want to do as a builder is, in most cases, what I've seen is builders start by using an external person to do their cost estimates. Not many builders that I know start off where they can do an estimate and a takeoff of a home and then come to a contract price. So a lot of guys that I know use contractors when they first start, and they get an estimator who does their estimate. That estimate needs to be given to the scheduler so that the scheduler can work through all the different cost centers of the home. For example, your site costs or your concrete costs or your bricks or timber framing costs for both supply and labor. And if that bill of quantities is able to be looked at when the scheduler finishes their purchase orders, and they can compare that to the original estimate and the breakdown with all the cost centers. They can then see where they were up or down through each cost center, because the estimator will make mistakes as well. The prices will fluctuate. You might, win a job, and then your roof tile supplier says, hey, look, our rates are going up by $1.50 a square meter on the roof, and then all of a sudden you're eating into that margin. The scheduler needs to understand this and the importance of having your original estimate figures for all of your cost centers, and then when they do the purchase orders, they need to be able to cross-reference these cost centers to know, okay, we were a little under on one area, but we were a little over. But they can begin to see that if they followed the estimate and then they did their schedule, they can see at the end of the day how similar those cost amounts were for the whole job. And if those cost amounts are similar, then you're going to write out with the same amount of margin at the end, given that nothing crazy happens during construction. And this is why it's so important for the scheduler to understand that that's their role. It's to protect you as a builder from losing too much money through the life of the job. This is why I think it's something that's commonly overlooked, where, I've seen this before, especially with volume builders, where they say, we're going to go out, we're going to get our roof quotes and, roof tiles, say, as a quote. And let's say the estimator has allowed $7,500 for this roof, and then a quote comes in at $8,100, and you've lost $600 immediately if you choose to go with that particular supplier. Or in the case where you have multiple suppliers that can supply the same thing, let's say for cabinetry and kitchen cupboards, if you go out to 3 different suppliers and you get one quote for $15,000, one quote for $17,000, one quote for $14,200, and your estimated amount was $14,900, well, immediately, depending on who you choose, you're either winning or losing money. And this is that balance of having that understanding as a scheduler. Where can I spend the money? Who can I go with that's going to be reliable and do a good job, because a supervisor might favor a particular company? And did I pick up enough money somewhere else so that we can use our preferred supplier, who maybe came in a little bit over, but overall we're still going to make the same margin that we need to stay profitable as a builder? And that's really the essentials of that scheduling role, or that scheduling role, or the quantity surveyor role, is being able to create the purchase orders, keep the budgets right during the length of time, plus also then, once the job is finished, be able to do a write-out report, to be able to say, this is what we thought it was going to be, this is what we actually spent on the job, here's the money we made. And you can then look at that and say, well, was this within our tolerance or not? And it's really an essential part. So it's not just doing the quantities up front, doing the purchase orders and then setting and forgetting. It is a job that requires management. And as a builder, as the registered builder, who I'm hoping I'm speaking to right now, it's on you to basically tell your staff members, this is what your expectation is. And so understanding that that is their role, this is the hat you're giving them to wear. And this is a responsibility you're going to ask them about at the end of each job. Where did we write out, and how can we do better in the future? As you begin to grow and you begin to build job after job after job, what you'll find that you will have common overruns and common unders. So you'll go over on one thing, under on one thing. And, we often talk about this in estimating. There's the joke, it swings and roundabouts. You win some, you lose some, which is fine if it's within a tolerance. And this tolerance is what I want to share with you right now. It's an important thing with building, because building isn't simple. There are lots of variables. To give an example, your regular carpenter might not be able to make it to a job because he's been poached off to some other project, and it's a multi-unit site, and you're not going to see him for 6 weeks and you can't wait. So you find another carpenter who can do the job, but they want a 5% increase on your rates, or whatever it is. And you're going to lose money, but you have to be able to make that decision to say, okay, I'm going to lose some money, but my productivity is going to be managed, and I'm going to keep having the production on site, which is going to bring in cash flow. It means I'm going to still be able to pay my 30-day accounts with my suppliers who supplied all the timber, because I'm going to get turnover. You need to be able to make those decisions, but you also need to understand that that's what happened on that particular job. And so when you do this right out multiple times, you can begin to see patterns. And those patterns become essential to have these overruns and to be able to see what they average out on your contract price. Let's say your average contract price was $800,000, and every time you build your write out, let's say your cost was $600,000 on that job, but you're writing out where your actual cost was $600,008, or $608,000, meaning you're losing $8,000 on cost every time you run that job. What you can begin to do is say, we're going to factor in an erosion on our jobs that are $600,000, for example. We're going to just add another cost to this, which is $800,000, which is going to be our erosion. Now, on some builders, for first-home buyers, for example, they might have their erosion down very, very low. It might be 1.5% to 2%. But on custom home builders, it's not unusual for erosion to be as high as 4.5%, especially in the luxury top end, 1.5 million plus, where you say, this is where we're setting our prices, this is where we know our prices are right now, but this job is going to take us 18 months to build. We're going to factor in for supplier price increases and things like that. We're going to allow an erosion of 4% or 3% or whatever that is. And this is the other thing that your scheduler should manage, so that they can work in conjunction with the estimator to say, we want our overall markup to be 24% or whatever it is. And in order to protect our costs, we're going to say, whatever our cost is, we're going to add this erosion amount in to every job to cover the swings and roundabouts, so that we're still going to write out at 24%. That's the key. So in wrapping up, the three things that you want from your scheduler, whoever's doing your purchase orders, is you want them to have a good understanding of construction. You want them to have a high level of attention to detail so that they make less mistakes, but that they can pick up things when they are a problem and give you opportunities to solve them before you're going to lose money. You want them to be able to analyze what the original estimate was versus the actual order prices as they print them out, to see where they are, to make sure they stay within a tolerance. And then you need them there to look at the write-out reports so that they can, over time, give you the knowledge that you need with your estimators to be able to give them feedback, to be able to say, we need to make sure our erosion numbers are within this tolerance, because we need to be able to protect the profits that we're setting at the start of the job. I hope this has helped. If you haven't hired a scheduler, or if you're looking to right now, or maybe you have one in place but you haven't actually sat down with them and gone through this, I suggest you do. Let them watch this video, for example, get their feedback and see how you can begin to implement these systems in your building company to protect the profits that you're going after. I'm Steve Fitz from Building Boom. We help builders with marketing and sales so that you win more jobs, and most of all, so that you stay profitable going forward. I hope you like this podcast. Stay tuned for the next episode coming up soon.